Meeting of the Old Bridge Planning Board for September 10th, 2019. If you all stand and salute the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To do this since it was paid?
Yeah, because she puts it out and you have to ratify it.
Okay.
Here.
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 Mr. Marucci?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Lenning?
Here.
Mr. Pink?
Here.
Mr. Luca? Here. Mr. Renner?
Here.
Chairman Cannon?
Here.
Ms. Carey?
Here.
Mr. Wong? Yes. Mr. Dargy?
Present.
Mr. Renato? Here. Ms. Jones?
Okay, I just want to remind everybody that we're being televised and that the cameras will be on until 10 o'clock and then they go off, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the meeting has been adjourned at that time. Okay, we have the minutes for August 6, 2019. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Mr. Marucci, second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Schmitz. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Here. Yes.
We know you're here.
I know, me.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Pink? Mr. Luca? Yes. Mr. Renner? Chairman Cannon?
Yes. Okay, we have resolutions, escrow deficiency resolution, Shannon Leo, $500, which is paid, but we still have to vote on it. So do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Mr. Marucci, moved by Mr. Marucci, seconded by Mr. Lenning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Abad?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Luca? Yes. Mr. Renner?
Yes.
Chairman Cannon?
Yes. Okay, 01-19P, new private restaurant properties, preliminary site plan with C variances. Do I have a motion?
That's Outback. That's the Outback.
I'll move.
Moved by Mr.
I'll second
Marucci. Oh, moved by Mr. Lenning, seconded by Mr. Marucci. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Luca? Yes. Mr. Renner?
Yes.
Chairman Cannon?
Yes. Okay, application 03-19P, Shannon Leo, minor subdivision with C variances.
Not to confuse anybody, this is an amended resolution. It was adopted, I think, at the last meeting. I think you know we send out these resolutions to the applicant and their attorney to review before adoption, expecting them to come back with comments. None were received until after it was adopted. So the comments were reasonable, and we're going to make those changes, and that's why there's an amendment. The next one is the same thing. Revisions were requested after the adoption. They were reasonable, so we're going to make them, and these are both amended resolutions.
So we need to vote on
So you need to vote on them. Yeah.
Okay, so can I have a motion for Shannon Leo?
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Schmidt,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mr. Pink. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Luca? Yes. Mr. Renner?
Yes.
Chairman Cannon?
Yes. And 01-18P, Woodhaven Village, Section 2, Phase 4, amended preliminary and final subdivision and site plan with C variances.
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Marucci,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Schmidt. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Luca? Yes. Mr. Renner?
Yes.
Chairman Cannon?
Yes. Okay, the tentative 2020 Planning Board meeting schedule. Has everybody had a chance to look at that? Okay, do you want us to vote on that? Okay, anybody have any questions or concern? Okay, then can I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Marucci, seconded by Mr. Pink. Roll call?
Mr. Abad?
Yes.
Mr. Lauer?
Yes.
Mr. Mamakis?
Yes.
Mr. Marucci?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenning?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're going to change the order of things a little bit here. 03-19P Mount Hebron Cemetery is going to be continued to October 29th. They don't need to notice?
Is anybody here from that?
Mount Hebron?
Application? All right, nobody in the audience, but this is your notice, they won't be renoticed. We're actually, just so the board knows, we're in discussions with them, we're questioning whether they're really supposed to be in front of the planning board or the zoning board. So not only would they not have been reached this evening, but this will give us some time to work out that issue. So there's a chance they may switch over to the zoning board, and we'll keep you posted. But for now, we're going to adjourn it, that way if they do stay here, they don't need to renotice. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in
Okay, do we need to vote on that?
no, it's just announced.
Okay, so nobody's here for that anyway. And we're going to hear next 11-19P, the Sedano Office Plaza LLC. And then we'll spend the majority of the meeting with Woodhaven, I guess.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Peter Klauser. I'm an attorney with the firm Heilbrunn Pape, and we represent the applicant Sedano Office Plaza. Mr. Heilbrunn's name is listed on the agenda for this evening, and I'm filling in for him. I've had an opportunity to work with Mr. Heilbrunn and the engineer Scott Turner on this project, so I am familiar with it. This is an application for a minor subdivision approval that is in front of this board. And what we're asking for this board this evening is for assistance in correcting what is a title issue that has existed on the property that only came to light recently for this present applicant. The approvals for this property date back, and I'm sure the board is quite familiar with the Sedano Office Plaza, which is located on Englishtown Road near Texas Road. 2 buildings up in the front and 1 in the back. And approvals date back to the early 80s for the use of this property as offices and a contractor's yard. The applicant took title to the property in 2001 by deed, and somewhere between the 1950s, well, we know exactly where, but somewhere between the 1950s and 2001, someone decided to add 70 feet to the legal description of the rear of the property, and it followed along in the chain of title. And when our client took title, the survey that he received at that time in 2001 showed the additional rear portion of the property, and he's utilized it as part of his storage area since then. Application was last before the township in 2003. Jonathan Heilbrunn from our offices presented the 3rd building, which was constructed in the back as part of the continued use of the property as a contractor's yard. And looking more recently at potential development of the property, hiring a good engineering firm, they realized that there was an issue with the survey and the actual title deed. We hired First American to do a report for us. I shared that report with your professionals. I've read it, and that's what happened. There's 70 feet that was just added to the property. Fortunately, the neighboring property owner of Lot 5 was willing to work with us and convey to us a portion of the property. That conveyance is illegal without your assistance. It requires a subdivision. So we're here this evening to ask the board for a subdivision. There's variances that are related to existing storage on the property. And if the subdivision should go through, we'll be able to complete the purchase of the property through the subdivision deeds. And that's all that this application is about. There's no proposed improvements on the property. There's no change to the way the property has operated for almost 2 decades, or how it's been approved for decades, going back to the 1980s. This is simply to allow us to add the property to put all of our use on lines that we actually own. And I have Scott Turner from Menlo Engineering. He's the engineer responsible for the plans. And if I could, I'd like to have him sworn.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
Scott Turner, T-U-R-N-E-R.
Thank you.
Scott, just share briefly with the board your credentials, your licenseship, so that I would ask that the board accept you as a professional engineer.
Sure. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have a bachelor's of science degree in civil engineering. I'm currently a principal engineer with Menlo Engineering Associates, and I've been before this board many times in the past.
Okay. I just want to ask you if you could use the microphone,
Oh, sure, yeah.
please.
This one, Chair? Scott, for the record, if you could just identify the property and its location for the board.
Sure, this is not an exhibit. This is one of the plans that were part of the application package, so I don't think we need to mark this. It's the overall plan prepared by my office. It is a minor subdivision application between Block 20001, lots 5 and 9. Lot 9 is the Sedano Office Plaza property. It contains 1.86 acres. Lot 5 is the Texas Road Plaza, otherwise known as OC7. A portion of that application contains 14.92 acres. And we're here just for the subdivision of the rear property of the Sedano Office Plaza. We are acquiring lands from Lot 5. That dimension is 73 feet by 303 feet, plus or minus. So the total acquisition area is 22,088 square feet, or 0.51 acres. So at the end of the subdivision perfection, Lot 9, the Sedano Plaza lot, would contain 2.37 acres. Lot 5 would contain 14.42 acres. The property's in the CN commercial zone. The Sedano Plaza is an existing commercial development, previously approved by this board and I believe maybe the zoning board in the past. There are 2 office buildings in the front along Englishtown Road, and then an existing storage building along the rear, again, all approved by the boards that were necessary. And the reason why we're here to obtain the subdivision, number one, is to allow all of the improvements that Mr. Sedano has had on his property, because he thought he had this land, as part of, under his control, to get those improvements on his property through the subdivision. There are some existing storage areas in the rear of the property, and there are 3 small storage containers, 2 containers, and then 1 existing shed. So these will all be now located on the Sedano property as opposed to being off property. They do require variances as they are accessory structures, and the side yard and rear yard setback requirements in the zone is 50 feet. So the side yard setback variance would be to permit an 18.3-foot setback, and the rear yard would be to provide a 2.1-foot setback along the rear. And that's really all we're doing.
And the rear yard setback is to the neighbor that's signed off on the application?
Yes, correct.
And is selling us the property?
Right, and that rear yard, all of that area that we're abutting in that is regulated wetland area.
And
Englishtown Road is, north is straight up, so Englishtown Road is on the westerly side, sort of towards the left of the property.
The-
Sure.
There is, as I stated, there are no improvements proposed as part of this application. You can
None.
confirm that.
None.
You haven't been asked to design any. There were a couple of technical comments for amendments to the plans, and you have no issue, I understand, from complying with either of those.
Correct. We have letters from the planner and the board's engineer, and we have no issues complying with the reports. And we have a Bureau of Fire Prevention letter as well, which had no comments.
You assisted the client in outlining the area that was to be negotiated with the neighbor, and there is just no further property available from them due to their own use and constraints on the property.
That's correct.
I have no further questions of Mr. Turner. There's one issue I'd like to just confirm with your planner, but Mr. Turner's available now for the board's questions, members of the public, and your professionals.
Okay, Bina? You don't have any?
I have no further questions for Mr. Turner.
No comment? Okay. Is anyone from the public here to wish to comment or have any questions regarding this application? Seeing no hands, we'll close the public portion.
And a part of the planner's report was just, she'd raised a question that I kind of introduced with regard to title, and I did provide your planner with a copy of our title report, and I think that may have satisfied any questions she had about how this happened.
We appreciate the title report, I reviewed it as well.
Yeah. So that's your applicant's complete presentation. Again, we're looking for your help. We like to fix our title issue and put what we're operating on onto our property so that we don't have any issues with our neighbors. But we need this board in order to be able to do that.
Okay, does the board have any questions or comments? Yes. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I would think the first would be the obvious question is do you have the ability to reposition storage sheds? So variance is not required.
You know, the setbacks in, the accessory setbacks are pretty onerous in terms of 50 feet. So the answer is no, not to comply with 50 feet. We're talking about a piece of property that's only 300 feet, roughly 340 feet deep by 300 feet wide. So to try to comply with a 50-foot setback in each case really isn't feasible. And because the rear yard setback, we purposely set that line so that we could have those on our property now. In order to do that, and we had felt that it's appropriate because of the fact that we're abutting wetland areas that could never be developed anyway.
Okay, does anybody else from the board have any questions or comments? Okay, do we have a motion to?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Mr. Marucci.
Just for the record, the motion is to approve.
To approve.
The subdivision and the 2 variances requested.
Okay, and seconded by Mr. Lenny. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Mr. Lauer,
Yes.
Mr. Hamakis,
Yes.
Mr. Marucci,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt.
Yes.
Mr. Lenny. Yes. Mr. Pink. Yes. Mr. Luca. Mr. Renner. Chairman Cannon.
Yes.
Thank you, and I
Thank
thank you
you.
for adjusting your schedule to take us first. I know you have a lot of work to do tonight. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you want to rest? Oh, okay. Should I announce at the beginning about the Wetchupalt Road? Because I think most of them are here about the road. This. Hawkins
Yeah,
Road.
maybe when he starts out, when they say that to.
Oh, after he's done his thing.
His intro, and we'll say what way.
It was.
I mean, if that's their only issue.
Clicked on it, it's
Go ahead.
LLC, it wasn't like a, the name, yeah.
Zoning board members.
Well, I was gonna ask that question, but he
What is
did
it?
say that
The materials for the zoning board.
they got approved, so
Oh,
can't give away somebody else's property.
yeah, that's neat. Is that Old Bridge? Is that what you're going to do for us?
It's our next project.
Trees again?
We got a note from Mr. Hart. I was just going to refer to it and let everybody know we received that from him today.
Is that the,
He's okay with just leaving Hawkins Road alone.
we are
We just didn't realize all these people here probably for that, so if we just let them
any
know.
wind is like you
'Cause
feel
I
like
think-
people are,
Close it up
you know,
and,
walking on your seat, you know?
get to the home.
Next you'll have a.
There was
roof
a
you need to
police
replace.
letter also? I had it replaced like a few years
I
ago.
only got fire. Did
Is
you
that
get-
a new fire?
He just said he's not going to make.
He's
me-
not coming.
Oh, okay.
He said he went along with it, but he still doesn't agree with it.
Want to take care of that?
So I thought I could put that on
Yeah, right after you do,
after you're done with your introduction.
that way all these people maybe can
Yes.
go to sleep.
Okay, we ready? Okay, application 58-14P, Woodhaven Village, Section 3, preliminary subdivision, major subdivision with C variances.
Good evening.
Hello, Mr. Shimanowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Ron Shimanowitz for the applicant, Woodhaven Village, Inc. We were last before you with the Section 3 application. We introduced the application last time around with our first 2 witnesses, Mr. Bill Ife, as well as our site engineer, Lisa DiGirolamo. And at that point, we broke and were continued to tonight. What we plan to do tonight, we have 2 witnesses. We have our traffic engineer, Dan DeSario, and we also have our architect planner, Rob Larson, to cover those type of issues. And with that, we're ready to proceed with our first witness, unless there's other housekeeping items you want to deal with.
Yeah, do you want to mention that?
Okay, and I have a message. I think some of you are here because of the Hawkins Roads issue.
Yes.
So we got a note from the fire official who, Thomas Hart, unfortunately he couldn't be here tonight, but he did write a note saying that he's addressed the concerns of the residents of Hawkins Road at the last meeting about the emergency access roadway. And he says that he reluctantly agrees to the removal of the roadway. Should it, so he is in agreement with what you were asking, that there will be no connecting roadway.
Is anyone get a copy of that, or?
Do I have a?
Sorry, we can't get you, you're not being recorded. So, let me just, what the chairwoman is talking about will be included as a condition in the resolution, so the paperwork, if the board,
It will be part of the official,
official,
whatever we end up doing. I mean,
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate
okay,
it.
so if you're here just for that issue,
Yeah,
I just wanted to,
That's what a couple of us are here for.
and what we'll do is we'll mark this as, let's say B1 for Board 1, okay? So this will be part of the record and the file that we keep, okay?
Thank you so much. The process is great.
okay. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the application, but in case you want to get home, I just wanted to,
You know what, Madam Chair?
oh,
you might wanna
what? Oh,
grab-
wait.
Before you folks leave, there was a letter that was submitted from the police, from, get the name, the sergeant, who had a different view of it. So
Oh.
if that's going to be in front of the board, I don't want the
Oh, okay,
public
yeah.
to miss out on it.
Oh.
No, thank you, we didn't see that.
Okay, so, yes. Yep, we have copies of that. So this letter, obviously.
Oh, you
is-
may want to sit down again.
Yeah, exactly. That's why when you were telling me about Mr. Hart's letter, I was a
Okay.
little confused because I thought you were referring to the police chief's letter.
Okay, yeah.
So this letter is actually dated September 9th, 2019. It's signed by Sergeant Herbert K. Doctors, and I'll provide copies to everybody. It takes a much different view of the emergency access to Veterans Road.
All right, we're going to mark that as A6.
I think we're up to A6, that's what my notes say as well.
How come we didn't get that?
Yeah. Yes, let me figure it out. Ron, I think these are your papers.
So I'm actually seeing this letter for the first time myself. It was emailed late this afternoon. We'll give the board a minute to digest it. Excuse me? Oh, giving you all our secret paperwork. Thank you. Give the board a minute to digest the letter.
Oh, they're going to put a gate at each end. Did our traffic person see it? Or wouldn't that be it, when she does that,
Yeah.
or no?
Did you get a copy?
Do you have a copy of it? Oh, okay.
I don't know if you wanted to summarize the letter for the public, or how
Yeah,
you want to
why
handle
don't we,
it, but,
'cause-
you know, ultimately, it'll be up to the board. Now we have a Hart letter, and we have a police department letter, and Woodhaven is willing to do whatever the board decides.
For the public's benefit, the police department sent a letter, it's basically saying they're, it's not it's not the town's fault or anybody's fault for how Hawkins Road was designed and the fact that it doesn't connect in anywhere else in the town. And they understand your concerns, but they really are concerned about your safety and about an ability to get in there. They're suggesting some sort of perhaps gravel road with perhaps a gate at each end to make sure nobody else really uses it, but they want the ability to get in there and to get to you more quickly in emergency situations. They're open to how to do that, but they want to make sure the road is substantial enough to be able to carry a police car or an ambulance. And like I said, now, the audience convinced the fire marshal, but the police are not as convinced. They're more worried than the fire department, I guess, about the time that it takes to, and they also probably have the same sort of agreements with the mutual aid. So maybe they're more concerned. So
Mr. Hart did use the word reluctantly.
Oh, Mr. Hart was very reluctant, yeah. So the board has a lot to think about, and the police did say they're open to options, whatever, as long as it provides for safety. So we'll have to continue to think about that. Should we do that now, or?
Were they aware?
Yeah, you need to come up and say your name.
Was the police aware?
Say your name and your address.
Jesse, 88 Hawkins Road. Was the police aware that it was unanimous for the whole street that they didn't want it? Was they aware of the residents' position at all, or?
I have the letter, that's all I have. I don't have.
Yeah. Because the fire chief we were able to speak with and talk to and converse with, where, he just wrote a letter, and we didn't really get the chance to discuss maybe options or our view at all. I mean, the street was unanimous. I mean, you guys couldn't accept the petition, but it was a unanimous petition. And, it's been like that for, over 30 years I've been there. And it works,
All right, I think the board is clear on the neighbor's position, on the fire marshal's reluctance, and on the police position. So at this point, move on, and we'll have to.
Because there was a gate there at one time.
Yeah.
And, people just went around it. Dirt bikes and trucks and everything else just went around it and just, all tore through there and everything like that. Okay. And it's not nice for the residents to see, the trucks like that go through and then all covered in mud come back because they're off-roading in the back there and they just go around the gate, It's not so things to think about.
Okay, thank you. So it's not a settled issue yet.
Yes, my name is Clive Gitlin. I live at 118 Hawkins Road. I also own 112. And it's just funny that in the 12 or 13 years I've been there, the police come down the road maybe once or twice a month. You can check their records. They hardly ever come down Hawkins Road. They're hardly ever there. And the second thing is, if Old Bridge is so concerned about our well-being, why don't they give us public water and access to the sewer and natural gas? Why don't they take care of us instead of worrying about an access road that hasn't been there for 50 years? Thank you.
Michael Lee, 83 Hawkins Road. I'm a newer resident, but I've addressed the opinions of my fellow neighbors here. The other thing that I have a question for, and unfortunately the police aren't here to answer it, is a paved road is much more accessible to get to us than a gravel road. And I think if the police are going to access our road, it's going to be down Route 9, not up Texas and down a gravel road to get to us. That was my only question that I would have for them. Thank you.
Okay, well, we thank you for your input. I mean, they do refer to the fact that, in emergencies, it's taken them once 26 minutes and another time 10 minutes to respond to the emergency, which was unacceptable, so. Okay, we will continue.
Okay, thank you. Our first witness today is Dan DeSario, our traffic engineer. We're going to have Mr. DeSario sworn.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State and spell your name for the record, please.
Certainly, Dan. Last name is DeSario, D-I-S-A-R-I-O.
Dan, I believe you've been accepted in the past as an expert, but just for the record, your qualifications briefly.
Certainly, Bachelor of Science Civil Engineering, Temple University, Master of Science in Transportation Engineering from NJIT, licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, and have been since 1996. And I routinely appear before various planning and zoning boards throughout the state as an expert in traffic engineering, including
Accept
this
your
one. Thank you,
credentials.
Madam Chair.
Dan, before you get rolling, I understand your main part of your testimony is going to be regarding the connection to John Wall Road. Is that correct?
Yes,
And are there exhibits you're going to utilize to present your testimony?
there are if the board's interested in seeing them, yes.
Okay. I think they probably are.
Okay.
So why don't we get those marked? Are there, I see you have smaller versions, are there full-blown versions of them? Yep, let's do that. I'm going to start with A7.
So for identification purposes, A7 is a draft plan entitled John Wall Road and Woodhaven Boulevard Alignment Plan. It bears a date of October 13th, 2017, and it was prepared by my office.
Good, A7.
I do have reduced copies if the board would like to
I'll
see
hand them
those.
out.
All right, thank you.
I know, we have more copies of our stuff.
Might as well do this one too. And Exhibit A8 is also a draft plan entitled Signing and Striping Plan. That bears a date of June 26, 2019, also prepared by my office. And briefly, just for record completeness purposes, as the board's aware, this is Section 3 as part of the overall Woodhaven Village development. The number of units in this section has not changed from what was always proposed and is consistent with the latest amended GDP approval that was granted by this board. So as it relates to traffic and the associated impacts for this section, those are consistent what we've originally presented to the board on numerous past occasions, and it's consistent in terms of the overall development and the traffic studies that were done as part of the various hearings for the amended GDP approval. So with that, if the board has any questions, I would just proceed to probably a very interesting topic for the board, and that is the intersection of John Wall Road and Englishtown Road. Referring to Exhibit A7, this plan depicts the overall alignment towards the westerly side of John Wall Road, which is going to become Woodhaven Boulevard. And as part of this overall development, Woodhaven Boulevard will be extended through Section 3 and to the west to intersect Englishtown Road opposite Matchaponics Road. So a new four-leg intersection will be created with that extension of Woodhaven Boulevard to Englishtown Road. That intersection is proposed to be signalized, and the geometry along all of the approaches will consist of separate left turn lanes and then a shared through right turn lane, with the exception of the Matchaponics Road approach. That approach will just consist of one single lane that is 15 feet wide. We originally were proposing a left turn lane for that approach, but in discussions with the county, they requested that we remove the left turn lane from that approach. So the intersection will be consistent with other ones along Englishtown Road in terms of the geometry and providing left turn lanes along Englishtown Road. A new signal is proposed as part of this creation of this new intersection. And again, this is consistent with the improvements that were agreed to as part of the amended GDP approval, both with the township as well as the county in the tri-party agreement that governs all the improvements associated with the continuous build-out of Woodhaven Village. The second exhibit is just a simplified version, if you will, of the previous one. So Exhibit A8 is simply a signing and striping plan of the intersection that is proposed with Woodhaven Boulevard intersecting Englishtown Road opposite Matchaponix Road. And again, it's just a simple version presenting all the signing and striping for that intersection. We are currently working through preparing design documents, and admittedly, the applicant is looking to us to prepare those documents, and we're a little behind schedule in terms of what we promised. But we are proceeding with preparing full design documents for both township and county review. And that concludes my testimony. If the board has any questions regarding any of the traffic aspects of this application, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, well, let's hear from our traffic engineer.
In regards to the exhibit, I agree with Dan, is that, this improvement is consistent with the overall GDP approval and consistent with what the county has seen. I have seen previous plans that did show the left turn lane on Matchaponix Road, so they did originally propose it, and as you heard through the county, they asked it to be removed. I'm not going to get into that discussion because, again, that's county, so it's really their jurisdiction. The only thing I would say is that as we work out different pedestrian and bicycle facilities along Woodhaven through Section 3, they should be kind of tied into basically the extension or the realignment of John Wall Road. And that's something we can work out through reviews. But other than that, I don't have any specific issues.
Okay. So the board, any questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Lauer.
On the John Wall section of the road left, will that be still under the jurisdiction of the township to maintain?
Yes, I believe it will be up until a certain portion close to the intersection. Then the county will have jurisdiction over that.
And the remainder where...
I'm sorry, can I just, Mr. Lauer, are you asking about what the existing portion, like what's out there right now?
No, what's going to be left after the boulevard comes
That's what I
through?
mean, like, what's going to be left of the existing road?
Yes.
So
I misunderstood. I'm
my
sorry.
understanding of that is that it's going to be turned over to the property owners and it'll be private access.
That is correct.
So that means that the township will have to vacate the right-of-way. And if you'll notice, there is a private driveway now, but it's serving two properties, so there'll have to be some form of easement to allow the continued access to those two properties. Because right now, John Wall Road provides access to those two properties.
Correct.
Now we're moving John Wall Road up to the intersection, and that section that's left over has to be vacated. So we have to make sure that those property owners still have future access by means of some kind of easement once that road's vacated.
Okay, so then the name John Wall Road will be, no longer exist?
Correct.
Okay,
It'll
thank
just be
you.
Woodhaven Boulevard going all the way out.
Anybody else from the board? Yes, Mr.
At the last
Schmidt.
meeting, there was a gentleman on Englishtown Road who expressed concern about his septic field being involved in this.
The movement of that.
I don't recall that. I was at the last hearing. I can tell you whatever is required to accomplish what is depicted on the plans. If a septic field is impacted, then we'll have to address revisions to it. You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else from the board? Yes, Mr. Lenning.
Has the existing owners for the remaining piece of John Wall that's not going to be called John Wall anymore, have they been notified that that's going to be a private road? And they would have to maintain that?
There's been discussions over years, I believe, with the adjoining owners. It hasn't been entirely worked out, so there's a work in progress. So as Dan stated, this is a draft plan, so it's a very fair question. There are issues to be worked out with the landowner, so it's all subject to that. But we've been working on it and are working on it.
Active ongoing discussions with them?
That is correct, yeah, yeah.
Yes, the applicant is indicating with a response, oh, yes, oh, yes.
It's just concerning because, you know, after like a 12-inch snowstorm and this road, you know, it's a pretty long section of roadway that's going to access their driveway. If they don't have means to plow that, you know, they're going to be calling the Public Works Department, which is, you know, going to have to come and, you know, get these residents access. So they should really be aware of that because, you know, the Public Works Department has a lot of roads to cover.
We'll note that in our discussions.
Also, what is the time frame of getting this done in terms of the development, of this phase of the development?
This is part. Well, why don't you come up and identify yourself for the record?
You were sworn in at the last hearing.
Yes, my name is Bill Ife. I was sworn in at the last hearing. The plan is to get the approvals, get the design done now, get the approvals right away, and put this in with Phase 1.
I'm sorry, what?
At the beginning of the project, at part of Phase 1 of
Oh, at the
Section 3.
beginning?
At the beginning, yes.
Okay. Because we don't want what happened with the intersection of Texas and English Town Road.
We've been working with the county now for several years, so we know how that goes. So we've already had discussions with them. They've approved this plan. In fact, this is largely theirs. And the township engineers, Ms. Shapiro, they both have approved this plan. So now it is a matter of turning it into construction documents, actually acquiring the properties that are necessary, and whatever agreements we have to make with the people to acquire those properties, and then proceed. But this is important for us for the first phases of Section 3 to get Woodhaven Boulevard built all the way up to Texas Road.
So I guess the question is, as far as the tying it to the construction schedule or COs in Section 3,
it's in the amended GDP. I believe there's, and it's in writing, the amended GDP. I believe it's 50 building permits in Section 3 before Woodhaven Boulevard has to be all the way out to Englishtown Road. So the timing or the constraints already been imposed.
I think, and that's what I think the chair was sort of looking for, is
So
what are the constraints? It's 50
I
COs.
believe it's 50 COs in Section 3.
0?
50. Before it has to be put all the way through. And we agree with that. It needs to be put through right away.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the board? All right, we'll open to the public. Yes, regarding this testimony? If you give your name and address, please.
My name's David Zimmerman. I own the property that's going to be split by the road.
Did you give your address?
It's 301 John Wall Road. And I am 100% behind this, although I'm questioning the ability to slow the traffic down as we come across the brook from a 40-mile-an-hour collector zone to 25 miles an hour so that the radius can be tightened. And I don't know if you can put this up on a screen somehow, but if the radius could be tightened, it would square up the alignment to match Aponics Road and allow me a more buildable lot after I sell Woodhaven the property that they need for the road. That's my only concern. Thank you.
Something we'll have to talk to Mr. Zimmerman about. Again, there's been ongoing negotiations. If you want to respond to it, Bill, please.
I think we've looked at various ways of putting the road, Woodhaven Boulevard through John Wall Road out to Metroponics with minimal impact It's a lot of impact to his property, but trying to minimize that. And depending on the approval authorities with the radii and how fast the speed limit is, the radii can be tighter so that he gets a squarer lot to work with when we get all done. So it's really it's up to the township.
We've got a structure just as the property, as the road turns to the north, that theoretically could be considered historic, but it's really not listed in the state of New Jersey's historic books. And I'd be willing to sacrifice that property. It was built in 1806. It's a 4-bedroom colonial, so that the road could turn to the north further, so that we could have a more rectangular lot that I can build something on that would be more neighborhood friendly, with access back into Woodhaven that might allow for a bank, a gas station, a 7-Eleven, something on that corner south of the traffic light. Because right now, the way this is drawn, that pie-shaped property is really not buildable. I can barely fit a 2,000 square foot building on it. And I've gone through conversations with Old Bridge Township, and I've hired planners. It's just not a buildable lot at a traffic light into a beautiful new development. I'm trying to work with the property owner next door. We could probably do something like Wawa did with the property on Route 9. Maybe Steve and I can join forces and take some of his property to the south and put something on it. But if you look at the building envelope of what's left after this, it's nothing. And I don't want to assess, and I don't want to fight with Woodhaven to stop the development. But this is a great little parcel at the entrance to a development that's been on the books for 30 years already. So if we can square it up and I sacrifice that 4-bedroom home that I don't need, and Steve, you know I'm here. I've got a thriving business in Old Bridge Township. I have plans to put up a 12,000 square foot fabrication facility just to the north. I'd like to try and move forward, and I have no representation here except my wife and my correspondence with you and David over the years, but it's been 5 years already.
Okay, can we have our planner? He has a comment.
No, does the applicant or the gentleman that just spoke, do we know what zone you are in out there?
Go back to the mic, please.
Are you in that commercial zone?
I have residential, I have farm, I have neighborhood commercial, and I have light industrial as a variance through the zoning board 6 months ago.
All right, so
this property is a mishmash.
Okay.
And as part of all this, I'm planning to subdivide off the residential partials with Nicole and what's the planner's name? I forget.
Ina.
We're going to put the residential properties on 1-acre parcels. That's going to be converted to commercial. My business is light industrial. That'll go to the north. And the balance can remain neighborhood commercial. And we've got enough room for something like Delicious Orchards there on that corner to the north with my business tucked in the back.
Madam Chairwoman, the reason why I ask is that looks like the remnants of the property is just going to be under an acre. So we may be creating an undersized lot as a result of this. So the gentleman has a good point about trying to square up the property to maybe get it within that minimum 1 acre size. And since this is just a preliminary approval. This should be something that be conditioned of finalizing this before they come back for final. And so I've heard a lot of really good points raised by the gentleman, I think it's worthy to explore this further to see if this can't be brought up to larger than an acre of land, so it is more usable for future commercial use. So I think at this point, the concept is good, but I think it needs refinement.
Okay, well, thank you for your input. Okay, does he have any more testimony? Or?
No, that is it for Mr. Desario.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Our next witness is our architect planner, Mr. Rob Larson.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And just state your name for the record and spell it, please.
Sure. Robert Larson, Larsen.
And Rob, your qualifications for the record?
Sure. I am a licensed planner and a licensed architect here in the state of New Jersey. Licensed in 2005 as an architect, in 2011 as a planner. I've presented in front of this board in both capacities many times, as well as throughout the state and as well as Superior Court.
Thank you.
Rob, I think there's a few things you're going to speak to tonight. One is the two variances we're seeking, as well as the extended vesting request. And I believe you're going to show the architecture of the two families. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. And I guess just for timing of my testimony, I'll put on my architect hat. I did bring a rendering of the zero lot line patio homes that are proposed. There are 72 of them, and there are, as has previously been stated, 292 single-family lots. The two designations, I believe, are under the SFD 5 for the single-family lots and the zero lot line patio home designation, all part of the permitted GDP land use designations.
The next exhibit would be Exhibit A9. If you want to identify that for us.
Okay, if I may, what I've just put up on the easel here, noted as Exhibit A9, is a front, side, and rear elevation in color, as well as a first and second floor plan with just some tones set on it. And these are our zero lot line patio homes. I'll note that the title box, these are plans prepared by Holiday Architects, dated July 9th, 2019. What we see here are two homes next to each other. These will be, there are 72 of these. They are about 2,300 square feet, plus or minus, with a one-car garage. They also have 3 bedrooms. Again, it's 2,300 square feet. This is a pretty nice home, and just for the board's information, the zero lot line is what separates these two units from each other. Again, these are permitted, and I believe you can see that the architecture that is proposed is to be of the quality and consistent with the overall development that is happening at Woodhaven today, which I think is actually pretty nice. So really, this is just to give the board a flavor of what these are going to look like. Again, they're in little pairs of 2, and they are each on their own lot.
No questions regarding the architecture for the patios, then I would have Rob continue on to the variance testimony, I presume.
So, are they attached? Are they attached? So it's like a townhouse, a mini townhouse?
And if they are attached, right? So they do touch each other. They are attached. They have a common wall. There's an imaginary line, a property line that does go through them.
Oh.
Much like, similar to a fee simple townhouse, right? So the property line cuts through the wall. This just happens to be, as the ordinance defines, a zero lot line patio home.
Okay, because I think we talked about this before, but the patio homes that we have now in Old Bridge, I think at Old Bridge Mews, they're 2 houses, but they have space in between the 2 but it's still 0 lot line. I mean, it's just a different configuration.
Yeah,
So
and I think.
I'm not, familiar with this kind of a patio house. Looks more like a duplex to me, but,
Yeah, you say tomato, I say tomato.
huh?
You say tomato, I say tomato.
Yeah,
I like the other better.
It's two
Anyway.
units in one building, but each unit is on its own lot.
Yeah.
But they're attached,
They are
so they would
absolutely
share a
attached.
common wall.
Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah, it's like a townhouse, mini townhouse.
And
Okay.
And there are a number of definitions for townhouses, 0 lot line patio homes, cluster homes. There's a variety of housing types, and this
Okay.
this laid in this configuration is considered a 0 lot line patio home. So.
Okay. Rob, you want to proceed to the justification for the 2 variances?
Sure. I guess so. We're going to be, I believe 2 variances were discussed and presented. I actually have a clarification on what we were contemplating as a possible variance. I just want to bring it out for the board's attention, though it does not require a variance. And I will be speaking to vesting as well in terms of the extent of our approval. As I understand it right now, we will be seeking coverage variances for these lots that are proposed for both product types, right? So the SFD 5 lot as well as the 0 lot line patio home. We're proposing a 30% coverage where otherwise 20% is permitted on an SFD 5 lot, and 40% coverage where otherwise 30% is permitted on a 0 lot line patio home lot. I believe I've discussed this in front of the board before. Woodhaven overall is tremendously constrained by wetlands, right? And we have chosen to set lot lines at the 5,000 square foot minimum or lot size that is allowed under the SFD 5 and 4,500 for the other 0 lot line patio home to, in effect, limit the amount of land that is environmentally constrained that ends up on a private homeowner's lot. We, in fact, could move those lines back to come into compliance with the overall coverage to make the lot bigger, but we are choosing not to, and we're asking for the board to consider this variance so that we can offer, the homes and that are, we feel, appropriate and consistent with overall what the market wants, as well as Woodhaven, but not have to move those property lines and put, more environmentally constrained property on a private homeowner's lot. We've talked about this, I believe, in section 2 as well. So in terms of discussing the proofs for those variances, again, we have an opportunity to, I think, preserve what are already constrained and regulated wetlands by not sort of promoting people going back there and using them, each homeowner. And if I were to think of purposes or present purposes that are furthered by this, I think specifically of purpose E of the municipal land use law, which speaks to appropriate densities being placed and in concentrations for the well-being of a neighborhood, as well as considering the preservation of the environment. And also purpose G, which speaks to a variety of uses according to their environment. Again, this is a planned development that's part of Woodhaven. These are meant to be here, but we are choosing to lay them out, I think, in a more sensitive and placing the lots and sizing the lots in a more environmentally sensitive way. In terms of possible detriments that may be created by this, I really see none. These are homes that are consistent with the context and overall product that's being offered at Woodhaven, although we're varying it a little bit to, as was originally planned in this overall development. As I said, in large part, could we move those lines back? We would rather not. So we would ask the board's consideration to permit us to have these. It's a small lot coverage consideration, in my opinion, but we would ask the board to grant us that relief.
Just to be clear for the record, Rob, that relief, if you could just state it more specifically as to both the single-family and the patios, what's required and what's being proposed.
Yes, again, so for according to the percentages permitted on the SFD 5, I believe 20% is permitted on 20% coverage is permitted on an SFD 5 lot. We are proposing 30%. And 30% is permitted on a zero lot line patio home lot, and we are proposing 40%. So the relief we're seeking is 10% increase on both.
Thank you. Unless there's any questions on the variance testimony, I would ask you to turn your attention now to the extended vesting.
Sure.
I
okay.
actually do have a question.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I was just wondering, from what you're saying, and I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, the homeowner then would own their parcel, not just the house itself?
Yes, so everything about Section 3 is going to be a fee simple lot. So you have the zero lot line patio homes are what they say, right? So there's a zero lot line, meaning there's no setback that runs right through the building. Each person has their own privately owned lot, and the rest of them, the 292 singles, are a 5,000 square foot single family lot. So they own the land and they put a house on it.
And I just can't tell from the rear elevations. Are there decks off the back of those?
There are decks off the back.
Thank you.
And actually, before I go on to the vesting, thank you, Mr. Luca, for reminding me of something. There is the consideration of the decks that are off the back of these homes. I believe your ordinance considers these an accessory structure. The overall GDP, the PD ordinance does not speak to accessory structures, although your main ordinance does. So just for clarification, I believe an accessory structure in a relevant single-family zone would be 7 feet for a 2-foot-high deck, which would increase by 2 feet for every 1 foot in height. We are well in excess of that. We wanted to be sure that there was no consideration for a rear setback variance that might have been created because of our decks. They are considered accessory structures, not specifically addressed under the PD zoning. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. I believe the board's professionals also agree, but just to be clear, the decks are there. They do stick off the back of the house, but they are in excess of what would be required for an accessory structure.
They are considered, though, in the overall coverage for the lot, correct?
They are.
Slab on grade or basement homes?
These are basement homes.
Walkouts
Where they can be, and yeah, where they can be. I believe, if I know the grading, a lot of around the rim, and it's actually pretty cool the way they've designed it, is you have it running along the tree line that the grade drops off, and you can have a walkout. So.
And is the architecture going to be the same for all of the units?
So the single-family houses.
No, I mean for the patio homes.
Oh, for the patio homes, yes.
They're going to all look exactly the same?
So they're going to be the same style. Will they all look exactly like that and be the exact same color, I guess is the point.
I don't know, some variety.
There will be a little variety
Have
in terms of
72 houses all
color and finish, yeah.
looking the same?
Drinking too much, you go in the wrong house.
Okay. Anybody else did you have any comments? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to make it clear that in my earlier report, I identified a number of bulk variances for minimum lot width. And I just want to make it clear for the board and the public, you're going to correct those and not have variances for those lot widths.
That's correct. In my notes of your review letter, fixed. So the engineer is going to make it so that those do not exist.
Right. And let me just briefly revisit that discussion about the lot coverage issue. So let me ask you the question. Regardless of whether the lot lines were a little smaller and created the variance for those lots that have a coverage issue, or if it was larger and wouldn't affect the lot coverage, that would not have an overall impact on any of the stormwater management, right? Because lot coverage is typically controlled to not have too much impervious cover. So in this instance, would it have any impact at all on the overall stormwater management, regardless of where the lot lines were?
No, and in fact, the designs are, the stormwater design is already considering what will be proposed.
Okay, so really what you're asking for is a C2 variance. The special consideration of having the lot coverage variance would outweigh any detriment because of, you don't want the homeowners to have all these environmentally sensitive lands on their property.
Very much so.
I just want to make sure the board was clear on that matter. That's all I have, Madam Chairwoman.
Hey, Rob, let's proceed to extended vesting.
So, as part of our application, we are asking the board to consider an extension of the vesting that would be permitted for our preliminary approval. As we know, we can get up to, I believe, 5 years with extensions, but the board does have the opportunity, or we would ask the board to grant an extension on that based upon certain considerations when you have a development of over 50 acres, which we do, obviously. And those considerations are the number of dwelling units. We do have 364 dwelling units. So you'd be building at a pretty good clip to get 364 built in the 5 years, notwithstanding another consideration, which is the comprehensiveness of this development. We've already heard from Mr. DeSario. There's a fairly large connection of Woodhaven Boulevard coming and going in, as well as all of the other circulation roads that are part of this development, and all of these things take time, as well as do the approvals of all of the other agencies involved. The last consideration, which nowadays is not necessarily the biggest consideration, which are economic conditions. We happen to be in a vibrant economic environment, I believe. However, over the next years, that may not continue. So we would just ask the board to permit us 15-year vesting is what we're asking for to complete the construction of all 364 units. Again, just considering the sheer size of this development.
And that request, Rob, is being made pursuant to Section 49D of the land use law, is that
That's correct. So it's actually, yeah, so 4055 D49 preliminary approval extension.
Do
Mark,
we
have any comment on
Any
it?
comments? The engineer or the planner?
On the extended vesting, I would tend to agree with Mr. Larson that there's a lot more involved with this project. They're not going to be going out and sticking shovels in the ground tomorrow to dig foundations. They still have a lot of permitting to do. This intersection, the John Wall Road realignment needs to get resolved. So this stuff is, it's already been 10 years since I've actually been showing up with you guys. This project's been taking that long. So I don't see the 15 years as an out-of-line kind of request, given the size of this project and the hurdles that they still have to go through to get just the improvements built.
Also, Madam Chairwoman, there's still some outstanding questions that still have to be resolved. We heard about the Hawkins Road issue where they're applying for preliminary right now, and there's still opportunity to finalize that issue. We've heard the residents, then we've heard the letter from the police, and then we've heard the fire marshal as well. So, and then we've got the public that talked about the realigning of Woodhaven Boulevard. So there's a number of large outstanding issues that still have to be resolved before any shovels will be put on the ground. So it's not unreasonable to ask for an extended approval time for a project this magnitude.
So you're saying these could be resolved before final?
Yeah, these
Should these be resolved now?
Yeah, these outstanding questions should be a condition of approval for preliminary, and that they should be resolved before they come back here at final.
Yeah, I don't think, just to sort of amplify or echo what Mark was saying, some of these issues that we've talked about, especially the Hawkins Road issue, I don't think that's getting resolved right now. I mean, we can certainly, unless it's the board's desire to continue this application to another meeting and have that resolved, it's definitely something that we can make as a condition of the first final that they come in, because you know, the only thing they'd be able to do with the preliminary, certainly they can start doing, you know, some of the earthwork and all that kind of stuff, which isn't going to change, you know, with the issues that we're talking about resolving. But certainly we can make it a condition of their first final application that those issues be resolved when they come in. And that's really what I would recommend, because that's going to give us as a township and township professionals and the applicant the time that we need to really resolve it and actually put a thoughtful solution together for the issues we're talking about, especially the John Wall Road solution. Hawkins Road is just going to be, you know, not just, but it's going to be a matter of discussing with the police and the fire marshal and all that. But the John Wall Road is an issue that that I've sort of been involved with Woodhaven and the county and with Ms. Shapiro for a couple of years, discussing that alignment. And we've discussed, I can't remember how many different alignments we've discussed there. This was the favorite alignment from talking to Nicole. If we're going to revisit that, that's going to take some time to actually to work through. So yeah, I would definitely say that if the board's going to act, that all those items I think would be a condition of any final approval that they come in with. We also have some modifications that we're going to be making to the actual cross section of Woodhaven Boulevard, which I think was discussed at the last hearing. I feel like I didn't get a chance to talk that much. I'm not going to hold it against you guys, but there are some modifications to the Woodhaven Road cross section that we're going to be working on as well, that they'll have to bring back as that part of the first final. And also some of the stormwater drainage, stormwater management issues that we.
So I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing, so I can't hear a lot of what you're saying. But I just want to make sure that the issues you're saying can wait till be resolved until we address final. That we aren't if we were to vote to grid preliminary, that we're not going to lock ourselves in, so that some of these outstanding issues we're going to be barred from.
No,
you know, because we've been doing so many that we do the final and the preliminary and final in one swoop. So we used to do a lot of preliminaries and then the final. So it was more, you know, I can remember more about the process. So I just, you know, with such a large development and so many things going on, I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to make sure that everything is
certainly
the way it needs to be.
Like what I always do is defer to Kelly on all those kind of things. But certainly I think that the fact that you would making these kind of things conditional final, you have the ability to work on those matters. I mean, they're going to have to come back and present the design for Woodhaven Boulevard, the John Wall Road realignment, and all these things are going to have to get presented to you as part of that first final. Go ahead, Kelly. I'm sorry.
Yes, as long as we have them included as conditions and they're noted in the preliminary resolution, then they are open
So
items.
we have to make sure that we
Yes.
have them all listed.
All of it has to be listed in the
Right.
resolution.
Mr. Merwin?
They're asking for the 15-year extension now?
Yes.
Why would we extend a 15-year extension now? Why not wait until all of these things are done? And if it looks good, then we give it. Right now, we hold the hammer. We start giving the store away, then, we got nothing. Let's put this off, the extension, until the end. And then hopefully the Woodhaven Boulevard will be taken care of, John Wall Road, and the emergency access, and then we talk about the extension. I understand market and everything else, and that's when you should get it, but why the hell are we doing it now? Let's talk about it later, at the end. You'll get it, but right now, let's take care of everything else.
The response.
Well,
They could do it final.
the reasons Mr. Merwin gave about resolving some of these issues is the very reason that we're seeking the extension. And it just, with all due respect to Mr. Merwin, it just doesn't work that way. We're entitled to seek that extension under the land use law. This is the time to do it. We're in front of you proving our case. We make our case, you deliberate, you make a decision. It's not something you can kick the can down the road and say, oh, by the way, at some later date, we're going to give you an extended vesting. It's part of the application, and the board needs to decide it. And like I said, all of these issues that are of concern, like how we'll the emergency access at Hawkins be resolved, what will be the final configuration of the extension of Woodhaven Boulevard. Those are all time-consuming items, and it's part of the reason, not the reason, for the extended vesting. As your experts said, there's a lot to this. It's a big project, and that's why the land use law recognizes that you can pursue extended vesting, beyond what you would get in the typical project, the smaller project. So it's quite appropriate for you to be looking at this now.
Mr. Chairperson.
Does anyone else from the board have any comments?
I agree with him. He has every right in the world to request it, and we have every right in the world to deny it. If we deny it, does he have a chance to come and does he get a second bite at the apple? So it may be behoove them to not ask for it. Maybe he don't have the votes for the extension. We have that right. He's 100% right.
I'd like to address the board. The extended vesting is because of the size of the project. All the things that you would get by not giving an extended preliminary, by giving a 3-year preliminary, which is a standard preliminary for a smaller job. We cannot do anything, we cannot sell a single house without a final. So no matter how long the vesting is, how long the preliminary is, unless you're happy at final, then we don't do anything. So you have all the control over us that you could ever possibly have, because we're not doing this as preliminary and final in one night. We're doing this as a preliminary and then a final. We do a preliminary, we satisfy the conditions, and then we're permitted to go and even apply for final. So the extended vesting is so that I don't come back here in 2 years and say, I need an extension, I need an extension. You don't give us an extended preliminary 3 years from now. The preliminary is a one-shot thing. We'd have to apply for another preliminary. Just procedurally, it doesn't make any sense. With all due respect, the land use law has its procedures, and that's the way the land use law works. Is that is a preliminary and the preliminary is good for so long, and we have so long to satisfy the conditions. If we don't satisfy those conditions, we don't get a final. So at all points in time, you are in control. You are the planning board. And we've been here long enough, and we respect that. And we know that if we don't satisfy the board, we don't get a final approval. So the added leverage that seems to be out there about with this extended preliminary, and it's not an extension, it's an extended preliminary, that's not real. You have all the leverage you could have with that. And it takes time. We have to go to the county. The county meets once a month. Sometimes they get things done once a month. DEP takes a long time because they have a lot of regulations and they don't have all that many people. We have to go back and forth with any number of constituents, outside people, different regulatory agencies, et cetera. So all of these things take time. To get everybody's input, it takes time. And even if we got everything done, a final is only good for 2 years. So if we got everything done, you can't sell 364 houses in 2 years, in 3 or 4 years. So that's the other reason why you would get a longer preliminary. So it's not, we're not asking you to give up any kind of control over us. We're not asking that at all. You still have that with the finals, and we're willing to work with you to make sure that when you do come in for a final, that you're happy giving it to us. Thank you.
Okay, well, does anyone from the board have any comments or questions at this point? Can you just review what options the board has at this point?
Sure.
And what the ramifications are?
Right, so they're requesting the extended vesting, and this really is the type of project that this is designed for. As he said, there's no way they're going to get finished in 2 years with the work that we have them required to do in our conditions. So they would definitely be back. So the idea is that if they're going to put in all the time and effort to do everything we want them to do and to do it right, to give them the time to do that, the predictability that they know they've got the approval, but the board still gets to review it and make sure they did everything before the board's going to grant them final. I mean, this really is the size of a project that this provision was designed for. You know, a 2-year vesting when you're doing, you know, one store or a couple of houses makes sense, but on this size of a project, you'd have to make a completely different statute, or you can provide them with something like this that gives them extended vesting. I don't think it's unreasonable at all, the requests they're making. I also agree that the board is not giving up its control. The board, if they don't meet all the conditions of the preliminary, we can deny final until they meet them. So the board's not giving up that control. And like the chairwoman said, we haven't had a lot of these, but we haven't had a lot of these big projects lately. This is exactly why you do preliminary and final, so that they can plan to a certain extent, come before us, know they're on the right path, then go and get all the rest of the approvals they need. And then they come in, and if they've satisfied us, then they can get final, and then they can start building. It's really designed to give them our input so they can go forward with a certain amount of certainty that they're going the way we want them to go. So denying them the ability to do that, I don't see that how that benefits the town when we do still have that hammer to hold over them, that we won't grant final if they don't do what we've asked. And if we deny the request now, if we deny it, it's denied. We can't come back and then grant it again. You got res judicata issues. We've already made the application, we've said no. You can't come back and give it to them later. And
So if the extension was not granted, where would that leave them?
in 2 years, they need to come back and ask us to redo their preliminary so they can continue to go forward. 3 years, sorry, 3 years. Preliminary's 3 years, right. And then it's not, I mean, just a couple issues we talked about tonight alone, I think are going to.
Well, they could come back in 3 years and say, well, you know, market conditions have changed, and now I want things have changed, address the race judicata issue.
They could.
And now, in effect, you're really giving them 18 years, right? So that's why if you give them 15 now, you don't run the risk of things changing in 3 years, and then ultimately it be 18 years. So that's another way to look at it. Things can always change and be different. If they make the argument of race judicata and say, hey, look, you know, market really stinks and I can't sell a thing and, you know, conditions are bad, I need to get that 15 years, and if you give it to them, then in effect you've given 18.
One way to look at it.
The statute spells out 15, not 10, not 5, not...
Yeah.
They can request 15, yeah. And this really is the size of the project that it was contemplated for. I understand the concern, but the board still has to grant final. And there were a lot of conditions here that they've agreed to that they're going to address. And they've also agreed to give the town a lot of leeway in figuring out how to address those conditions. It's not something that we said, you have to do X, and we've said, do it exactly this way. They've agreed to work with the township to figure out these issues. So I think giving them the time to do that, yeah.
Yeah, they've always been good, so, but I just don't like extending 15. I mean, the GDP was extended, wasn't it? 20 years. So.
A long haul.
Long haul, exactly.
And again, that's what they're designed for these these bigger projects, yeah.
So normally on a preliminary, would they be expected to be further along?
No, normally it would be a smaller project, so it wouldn't take as much to get to
No,
the
I know,
finish
but
line.
I mean,
People have started.
but we've got a lot to do. You've got a lot to do. We don't have a lot. You've got a lot to do. So I'm just worried, is this all going to get done, or are you going to keep coming in and asking for extensions?
No, that's the very reason we're here tonight asking for the 15 years. We think that's sufficient.
Because, I mean, you know, the whole road realignment and all that's got to be in place before you get a final. I mean, with dead time frames and deadlines and all that, so we don't run into some of the issues that we have previously with the road work being, you know, the development there and then the road work follows.
We heard Mr. Rife, he plans to include the road work in the first phase. And that is the very reason why we see the need for the extended vesting. It's a big project. It's a part of Woodhaven, and in and of itself, it's a large project. I mean, 364 units, you could do the math in your head. If you sold at a fairly good clip, it would take you quite a few years to sell out the job.
And there's no affordable units in this project.
Section
And you're
number-
still in the phasing. I mean, this isn't just you still have to bring in the economic development.
As a point of clarification for the affordable units, Woodhaven has a construction obligation for 75 affordable units to build them. Those are all in Section 2. You've approved those all already, and most of them are constructed already. In each and every market unit we sell, we pay into the Township's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we're not literally building units in Section 3, but we're contributing for each and every one of our market units, we're contributing to the trust fund. So we are generating additional affordable units. As to the commercial phasing schedule, we're obligated for that, and we haven't asked for any benefits, for any relief on that. We're complying with that. So these units, we can only do so many units before we get the commercial built, and we're working on another parcel right now, parcel OC2 on Texas Road. We're working on that one. It's not ready to show you yet, but we're working on that one because we know those schedules better than the average person.
Madam Chairwoman, also, if I may ask the applicant, you've put on your plan the phasing of not only the affordable housing, the commercial, but also tying together the different timing for the road construction as it relates to your housing construction.
Yes, we have. Mr. Remsa has required that we make it very easy for the building department to know if we're in compliance with the phasing schedules or not. We have the schedules on each and every one of our phases by phase. So it's a very simple matter for the township to know where we are, commercial phasing and affordable housing wise.
Yes, Mr. Miller.
To either Mr. Ipe or Mr. Manowitz, if all of these extracurricular things were all taken care of, the alignment of Woodhaven Boulevard and John Wall Road and the access to Hawkins Road, all of these problems that you have right now, if they were all settled right now, would you still be asking for the 15-year extension for the build-out?
Yes, I don't want to call it, it's not an extension. It's an extended vesting because the project is so big. We're not driving to New York, we're driving to California with this project. You need more time to get there. Some things can happen, some things are out of our hands. The ability to sell houses, if everything were done today, and we could sell 50 houses per year, which is a pretty good clip. That's over 7 years to build and sell them. I mean, that's what everything done, and getting everything done, including the roads and the stormwater, getting everything done is going to take a couple of years, and the 15 years should be sufficient. I don't want to, think that it's going to take me 16 years and it only is for 15, but. Those things like Hawkins Road, that's a decision that the township is going to tell us. That's something that in our GDP, in our original GDP approval, we were told no connection on Hawkins Road, period. In the amended GD approval, we were told to make a connection there. And I just need somebody to tell me what to do, and we'll do that.
So the answer to my question was, you would still be asking for the extension of
Yes.
the vesting rights if all of that was already taken care of?
Yes, it takes that long. It takes that long.
Does anybody else want to join this conversation? Yes, Mr. Lauer.
When does the 15 years exactly start? Is it on the final or on the preliminary?
It would be from the preliminary resolution. So we're asking for extended vesting with regard to this particular application, which is solely for preliminary. So we want our preliminary protected for that period of time.
So if you get approved tonight, it starts tonight?
When we get a resolution, but
Right.
the concept is the same. Yes.
Okay.
Even prior to the, I'm sorry.
So next meeting presumably would have a resolution, vote on it, that would be the date that it starts, right?
Correct.
Even prior to the conditions being met, the conditions.
Yes.
Standing.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Thank you.
And so all the phasing, all that's going to be in place, but you're going to be more actively engaged in getting some things in there, some economic development.
Absolutely, yeah, have to be.
Not much is happening.
Actually, on Woodhaven Plaza, there's a 5,000 square foot building. The steel went up this week. Woodhaven parcel OC2, I'm looking at 72,000 square feet of flex space that the brokers tell me is very viable there. So you'll see that application very soon. And in parcel OC7, we went through a process where the county, for some reason, took us out of a sewer service area. It took us 2 years to get put back in, and it was strictly bureaucracy. With all due respect to the bureaucrats, it was over 2 years of bureaucracy to get mistakenly taken out of a sewer service area and then put back in, and I can't get a sewer approval without being in a sewer service area. So we sat at the red light waiting for the sewer service area issue to be resolved. It has been resolved. And so that goes up as soon as the MUA approves that, which hopefully should be next month. And you'll see OC7, which is the Texas Road Plaza 3, go up. We have it all cleared. We have it all cleared. We have it all ready to go. And there's a bunch of money of hours sitting out there doing nothing because we run into a permit issue. So we resolve that, and that should be going. So you'll see stuff happening. You will be seeing stuff happening because we've been working on it. Haven't been here, but we've been working on it, and you'll see that very soon.
Okay, thank you. Public.
Want to reiterate, excuse me,
Just state your name.
that I'm 100% behind this realignment, and I
Want to
have...
give your name and
Give your
address
name again.
again, just
My
so we
name's
keep track.
David Zimmerman, and it's 301 and 303 and 2072 Englishtown Road. But I'm behind the Woodhaven development. I have plans to put up a 12,000 square foot freestanding building on Englishtown Road. Nicole and your planner have instructed me to create a subdivision that will take the single-family dwellings and put them on 1 acre parcels. At the time that we can get this road realignment through, I'm ready to move forward with that, with John Plaskanka and Concept Engineering to do my submission to the township. So as quickly as we can get this alignment done, I'm ready to start construction on a new building on Englishtown Road, subdivide off number 303 onto 1 acre, and number 301, as I said before, I'd be willing to sacrifice for the straightening or I don't know the terminology, to create a more rectangular lot on Englishtown Road and Woodhaven Boulevard. That house could be taken down. I'd be willing to give it up to get that property squared up. And at that point, I'll begin the process to build my new building, and we'll be left with approximately 300 feet of frontage on Englishtown Road and about 500 feet on Woodhaven Boulevard. And at that point, we can talk about what we do with the northern corner of the new Woodhaven Boulevard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
How you doing? Dean Stackness. I'm with the municipality of Marlborough, Township of Marlborough, which is right adjacent to the site. As assistant township engineer, I was instructed to come here and voice a couple of concerns we have with the project. Not necessarily Section 3, but with Woodhaven, the whole property. The first issue we've had for I would say at least 10, 15 years is that at the corner of Marlborough Township, which is adjacent to Woodhaven, we have an old development called Whittier, and there's been a bit of a flood issue due to the blockage of the thing called Barkley Brook, which runs through the site. It's adjacent to, I think, the area by Bell Street, I think, was that section 2. And we have had communication in the past with developer and Old Bridge Township and the county as well, Middlesex County, try to get the stream cleaned. We just want to come here and voice concerns that getting the stream possibly cleaned, de-snagged, de-silted maybe, and also to see if we can have it maintained periodically in order to alleviate the concerns of the flooding we have in that part of Marlboro. That's one of the concerns. So if you want to respond, or you want me to go?
I'll have Mr. Ife respond to that.
By the microphone.
Just we want to be put on record. I know it's probably a county and a DOT issue, but the corner of Texas and Route 9, which is not far from the site where that's out at the Texas Road, we've had a lot of concerns raised by Marlboro about the traffic at the corner and whether Woodhaven, even though it's not so right on top of the intersection, whether they have any requirements to do any improvements at that intersection of Route 9 and Texas Road. We just wanted to put on record about the additional traffic I'm sure will be generated by the units. I would say a lot of them will probably end up going to that intersection, increasing traffic. That's and the last thing is with Hawkins Road, I overheard, it wasn't in my initial presentation, but we would have an interest in that in Marlboro as Hawkins Road ends up going out to Union Hill Road in Marlboro. So I'm not clear whether you said it's going to be open, it's going to be just emergency access, or you're still working on it.
Still working on it.
Right now is emergency access.
So would it be susceptible to people going through back and forth, or just emergency vehicles with key cards or something like that?
Emergency access would be for emergency vehicles
Okay,
only.
thanks. That's my concerns.
All right, thank you.
Have Mr. Ife respond to the first two items, the drainage and...
We met years ago to talk about the same alleged flooding issue on Woodhaven Village. In Marlboro Township, there is a development upstream from us. This development was put in without any detention basins at all. So this development was put in 40 years ago. So maybe he's saying that it didn't have to have detention basins. But there are no detention basins. There are no way for any of the silt or any other garbage that comes down from that development to be trapped in any kind of, to be trapped. So all of the silt comes down and it flows into Woodhaven Village. And so every once in a while, you get enough silt, and upstream of us, they are a good 18 feet higher than us in that area. So they're silting up the stream, and the stream backs up into their town. That's exactly what you would expect to have happen. I believe it was 10 or 15 years ago, they hired CME Engineering. CME Engineering dug out some pictures, some old pictures, where we put a culvert in. And they said, oh, you backed up the water all the way to Marlboro. Now you can imagine backing up the water up a mountainside. The water doesn't back up a mountainside. The water spreads out. Somehow they believed this in Marlboro Township. But meanwhile, I got some photographs from before we put the culverts in, and they had flooded Woodhaven Village, and they had killed a whole bunch of vegetation years before we put Woodhaven Boulevard in. So to answer his problem is that they've got to put in some kind of a facility or something to trap all of their debris and silt before it gets to Woodhaven. They are silting up the Barkley Brook. And maybe it was legal years ago, but I find it outrageous that they tell me that I'm flooding them out. They're damaging our property, and they continue to do so. They put some machines in, I think, when they just decided to go clean it out 10 or 15 years ago. They had DEP up in arms. Somehow, politically, it got resolved, and nobody went to jail. But if I did that, I would be in jail. I mean, I might be getting a little bit excited about this, but this is just completely outrageous that they would bring this back up again. They've had engineers look at it, and they have not applied any kind of engineering knowledge at all to it. They just were told to go make some noise down at Woodhaven, and that's what they did. And this is the same thing coming up again. As to Texas Road, as to Hawkins Road, it's very clear it's an emergency access. It is not and that's what's been asked of us so far. And it's emergency vehicles, period. It's not people driving back and forth. There's no access for Mr. and Mrs. Oldbridge resident or Mr. and Mrs. Marlborough resident to be using that. That's strictly for official business only. As far as Texas Road at Route 9 goes, that is not Woodhaven. I don't have the units really built there yet, and there's traffic problems. Texas Road, from previous discussions, Texas Road is functioning as an east-west arterial through Middlesex County in this part of the state. And people who are on the east side of Route 9, et cetera, if you want to go to the Turnpike and south, that's how you go. So this is a regional issue. We've widened Texas Road. We've put a bunch of lights on Texas Road to alleviate the local traffic concerns. But as far as Texas Road or Route 9 goes, that's a central New Jersey issue. That's not Woodhaven traffic. That's crazy. So, I mean, in summary, if there was a legitimate concern, of course we would take care of it. But, you know, we've been through this before, and, you know, not trying to solve it, just trying to blame Woodhaven or Oldbridge is just wrong. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't want to start a rebuttal and a debate here, but I just want to let you know it just got worse over the last couple of years. It's not trying to blame anybody. It's just nature takes its course, and it just got worse. So that's why I was told to come here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, we'll close the public portion. Do you have more?
Just a tiny bit. I just have two quick cleanup items with Mr. Ife, which should be fairly short, and then we are done with our case. I'll have Mr. Ife come forward. Bill, you were previously sworn, and you recognize you're under oath, correct?
Yes.
And as we've done in prior applications for Woodhaven, there are certain design waivers that have been requested, including aquifer recharge, disturbance of critical areas, and disturbance of sensitive areas. Could you just speak to those as you have done in the past?
The ordinance has a requirement for aquifer recharge. At Woodhaven Village, we are, as we've said at prior hearings, we are on a clay layer that precludes aquifer recharge. So we're actually in compliance with the ordinance, which says you have to recharge post-development what you're recharging pre-development. Pre-development is a clay layer, we're recharging effectively zero, and post-development, we're still recharging effectively zero. So we're in compliance with that, although we're not recharging anything because the site didn't. That clay layer explains the large amount of wetlands that are out at Woodhaven, because when it rains, Woodhaven is flat and the water just stays there. Critical and sensitive slopes is another issue that is in the ordinance. We have a few areas where we have constructed some slopes that are greater than 15%, and we're requesting a waiver to be able to do that. What was the other one? There's another one for filling impacts to wetlands. And the ordinance prohibits impacts to wetlands. We have an amended administrative consent order with the New Jersey DEP, which is effectively a large wetland permit. So DEP has permitted us to do that. We're requesting a waiver from the Oldbridge ordinance to do exactly the same things that DEP lets us do under the administrative consent order.
One more item, Bill, to clarify the record. Are we still seeking the RSI's de minimis exception regarding sidewalks on roads A, C, G, and I?
We are. There's limited areas where we have not put sidewalks on both sides of the street. The residential site improvement standards require sidewalks on both sides of the street in residential areas. In these areas, we have houses on one side of the street, and the reason for that is there are wetlands and buffers on the other side of the street. So to limit the wetland disturbances, we put sidewalks on one side of the street. We're asking for an exception to not have to put the sidewalk on the other side of the street. We do have, and the planner and the engineer have made sure of this, the ability to have someone walk continuously from one end of a street to another with an appropriate crosswalk to get to the sidewalk on the other side of the street. So we've provided that.
And the last item, Bill, I think we wanted to discuss with the board, at least the concept of some flexibility going forward as to the number of SDF 5 lots and the number of patio home lots. Not that we're necessarily asking for approval of a change in the plan, but just noting for the board that that might be in the offing.
To put more patio homes? To do what?
Well, Mr. Eiffel, explain it.
We need your microphone.
Was this an exhibit that was previously marked in this hearing?
I believe so. This is the land use plan from the amended general development plan, and it is marked as A2, A1 on August 6, 2019, which was the first hearing for this application.
Fine.
The reason I brought this exhibit is that in Section 3, it's a plan development, and the zoning is plan development zoning, so it's LD, which stands for low density. There are two parcels, LD 9.1, and then parcel LD 9.2. But they're zoned LD, and in the LD zone, there are various housing types that are permitted, single-family detached, the SFD5 we've spoken about, and the cluster patio home that we've spoken about, and that's what we've used. So they're both permitted in the LD zone. What I'd like to ask the board is that we've proposed 72 cluster patio homes and 292 SFD5 homes. We believe that the cluster home is a good product, and if the market agrees with us going forward, I'd like to be able to come back with an amended plan that might add some more of the patio home cluster houses to it. It would come to you as an amended preliminary, and you would have to approve it as far as how many of them I had and where I put them. So it would be the board's discretion to allow it at all at the time, and where they are and how many of them there are.
That be in addition to, or would you be reducing the amount?
The unit count would stay the same. The unit count would stay the same.
We would swap.
We would swap them, but someone some years hence would look at it and say, we understand if you're putting the same product on the same kind of lot, but you're kind of changing the lots now, and it's a preliminary approval. It's not a GDP anymore. It's a preliminary approval. So that's why I'd like to ask to build this in, that could be swapped if it turns out that that's a product that the marketplace wants.
And why would you do that? Just because of the market?
Because they would be selling better, and they take up less land. I might even be able to reduce some wetland impacts with it.
Okay, but the number of units would not change.
The number of units wouldn't change.
You have some lot line realignments for the zero lot lines and whatnot?
Yes, we'd have to do that, but this would just, to have something in this resolution, provided the board grants the approval, that equates them zoning-wise. It says that one of these units is zoning-wise the same as one of those units. You don't need a variance to change it. But you do need an amended approval to change it.
Just want some acknowledgement at this time that we may come back in and seek that type of amendment.
Okay, as far as the other, and then is that it? Is that it for the thing? Okay. And
That is it for us.
Does our staff our professionals have any issues with the waivers they're asking for?
Madam Chairwoman, I have no concern with the design exceptions with regard to the critical and sensitive areas. They're all falling under the DEP jurisdiction, and also the aquifer recharge. It's just something that's reflective of this area of town that doesn't have the ability to recharge. I do have one question, though. In my report, you are going to agree to address the street trees 50 feet on center and the buffering and landscaping that's required in the ordinance, so there won't be any design exceptions for those.
There will not, I've already chastised my engineer for not meeting the street tree requirement, so we will meet that. We will also meet the landscaping requirements. There's no exceptions requested for that.
So then I'm satisfied, Madam Chairwoman.
Sure. With regard to the aquifer recharge, I'm in agreement with Mr. Remza and Mr. Reif. The applicant submitted a pretty extensive soil testing study performed by yet another consulting engineering firm. They performed a lot of soil tests throughout the entire development area for Section 3 and provided soil testing, permeability testing, so on and so forth to demonstrate that not only is it just mapped and we have anecdotal evidence, but there's actual data that indicates that the underlying layer throughout this area precludes groundwater recharge. So I'm in agreement with that. And also the applicant is subject to DEP permitting. They do have the ACO, but they still have to go back and get DEP permitting. And the very same concerns that the township has in its ordinance regarding this issue, the DEP has also in its regulations, and they have to sort of go through the same bureaucracy all over again. So I don't have a problem with that. We do have a couple of things. We had a pretty extensive review letter, which I think the applicant agreed to comply with. We did have some pretty productive meetings to review our review letters with the applicant, so I don't have a concern about that. But there's a couple of things that weren't in the letter that I think we talked about a little bit. Just wanted to get for the record on the on the record here that could get included in any possible approval the board may have. The stormwater management system is going to consist of several drainage basins and water quality BMPs. Because this is going to be a fee simple single-family development, the applicant has the ability to request from the township that the township retain ownership and maintenance responsibility for the drainage basins. Our ordinance permits that with the caveat that the applicant post sufficient deposit sufficient funds for the township to perpetually maintain these drainage basins. And that's something that we would come up with Ms. Shapiro. But we also talked about possibly modifying the stormwater management design, still complying with the DEP regulations, but modifying the stormwater management design such as the BMPs that they're proposing would be maybe a little bit easier for maintenance purposes. They're proposing some sand filters and some things that you don't typically see in a residential type development, more stuff that you would see in a commercial kind of development, which I think Mr. Reif did agree to. I just want to get that on the record.
Yes, we did agree to that.
So that's another thing that we'll be working on, should the board act favorably, as prior to the applicant coming in for their first final. That's something that we're going to be working on to make sure we get that taken care of. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any comments or questions from the board? Let's ask the attorney. Yes. Mr. Merwin. Oh, I'm sorry. Casey.
The Public Works Department has to dedicate a lot of manpower to maintaining these retention ponds, the lawn mowing and all that. So it's pretty concerning that we could potentially have to take this over. I know it's an ordinance and stuff like that, but,
To take over the detention base?
yeah, whether it's, 15 years down the line after it's constructed or whatever the time frame is.
Right.
It could be immediately. But, we have to dedicate a lot of manpower to maintaining these and mowing them, and we have crews running every day doing that. So, for me, that's an issue.
Right. Well, we have a formula, right, that we use to
We do.
charge.
Yeah,
Maybe we need to update that formula. Make sure that it's realistic.
Well, the formula isn't so specific that it actually dictates the amount. What the ordinance actually says is that the township engineer determines the long-term maintenance cost.
Oh,
So,
okay,
so we
so-
have the ability to,
So the township engineer will make the final
Correct, yes.
assessment? So you have to make sure the township engineer knows of your concerns.
Madam Chairperson, my question was
Yeah.
basically, that's why I let Casey go first, because I knew he was the expert in the area. What is the difference between the critical slope at the township and the DEP? I mean, how big is, I mean, because I think our ordinance did it because of this grass cutting that we have to do. And we know that all the homeowners association is responsible for it, and they turned it over to the township in a heartbeat. You know, we go through this all the time.
As far as slopes go, a 3-to-1 slope, is considered mowable. And Old Bridge Township has a 3-to-1 slope as a critical slope, and a 15% slope, or a 30% slope is critical. That is not as steep as a 3-to-1, that's 33%. And a 15% is sensitive. So we have everything is lower than that in the basins.
So our lawnmowers won't be tipping over.
No, it's not, that's not an issue. Why we asked for the waiver was mostly technical. We haven't done anything extreme out there.
it's actually areas that you're grading to 15%. I think our ordinance really deals with a lot with existing grades that exceed 15%. That's really when because I think in section 2, that was the big concern we had. We had some areas that were in above the existing grades that were in excess of 15%, and we had a little bit of a conversation about that. But the proposed grades are really what they're talking about, and they have to be maintainable, and that's mostly private areas. Some of the drainage basin areas are going to be greater than that, but like Bill said, 3-to-1 is the acceptable slope for the drainage basin embankments.
Okay, Kelly, do you want to read?
Okay, so the applicant is requesting preliminary site plan approval and the 2 variances for lot coverage for the SFD 5 homes and for the patio homes at 10% in excess of what's permitted. They've agreed to comply with the planning and engineering memos. Conditions include the deposit to the town for the future maintenance of the stormwater basins, obtaining and constructing the final improvements to the John Wall intersection with Woodhaven and with English Town Road, and working with the town and the neighbors to finalize the appropriate configuration of that area. It's going to be a requirement that the basements in the SFD5 dwellings not become bedrooms, not be bedrooms, right?
Oh, yes.
That was in one of the memos. You'll need to, under the GDP, the deed restrictions for the DEP wetlands and the transition areas will be provided. Site triangles, basin access, slopes, and construction easements are required. Maintenance guarantee for landscaping for 2 years. Update the plans, specifically, I think it was talked about the Woodhaven Boulevard, the bike lane on one side and the sidewalks on the other. Providing that a roundabout may be added to Road A to the satisfaction of the board engineer and the fire department on that one. Traffic calming to be added before the Woodhaven Boulevard exits toward English Town Road to the satisfaction of the board engineers and planners. The Hawkins Road emergency access issue, whether or not it's provided, must be decided amongst the township officials, which would include the planner, the engineer, the fire, and the police, with the input from the residents. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I said this already, the remainder of the John Wall Road to determine where how the configuration to hopefully create a more conforming lot. And again, it's going to be an open sort of condition, something of a request that we're going to try to achieve. And to revise the stormwater, as discussed, to make it easier for maintenance, especially in the eventuality that the township takes over maintenance of those. in addition to all the normal requirements we have, inspection fees and all the normal things. And the design waivers that they discussed that were agreed to. Yeah, is there anything else? I think I covered it.
Not to nitpick, but you
Oh,
had mentioned preliminary site plan, or
Preliminary
preliminary
site.
subdivision. Yeah.
I'm gonna write it down, make sure I get it right.
Just so it's
Subdivision
clear.
with extended,
Major
extent,
subdivision.
major subdivision.
And the extended
vesting. And that final, any application for final will be conditioned on all these conditions being met.
Okay, are you done?
That's it.
Okay, I'm going to just, I thought I opened it and closed it to the public, but just to make sure, is there anyone else from the public who wants to speak before we take action? Okay, I'm going to close the public portion.
So that's what's being requested. If anybody wants to have a discussion or make a motion, that's what you're discussing or moving.
Okay, anybody have anything to say? Okay, so are we putting any kind of time frame as to when they have to come back for the final?
Before the 15 years. I mean, my guess is they're
15
going
years.
to, my guess is they're going to come back in sections, just like the other parts. So,
Yes.
I mean, you're giving a preliminary approval for the overall, they've got to get the road in and all that, but then they're probably going to come in, how many phases probably?
Three
In
phases.
3 phases. They're going to come with portions at a time, and they may even come with an amendment to the preliminary approval before that, given the fact that this is still a moving target. And that's why lately we've had just final approvals, because there were large preliminaries given in the initial phases, and then they've been coming back with either amendments and a final,
Yeah,
or
pieces,
or just a final. And that's, so that's how the staging has gone.
I closed
over
the
years.
public portion.
I just got to know with the issue on Hawkins Road.
Yeah, it's open.
Are the residents going to be kept in the loop somehow? Because, you know, they can come back whenever they
I can't
want
hear,
to
what is he
discuss
saying?
How are the residents going to be kept in the loop? How are the residents going to be kept in the loop?
Oh, will you maybe you could appoint somebody and we'll keep in touch with you, or, you know, somebody from the township, okay? Okay, any discussion? All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Mr. Marucci, seconded by Mr. Schmidt. Roll call.
Yes.
Yes.
He had to leave.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Lenny?
Yes.
Mr. Pink?
Yes.
Mr. Luca? Yes. Mr. Renner?
Yes.
Chairman Cannon?
Yes, but I would like to ask an addendum. I've been here since the beginning of this thing, and I'm going to be in another world by the time this thing comes to fruition. So could you, like, speed it up so I can at least see a finished edition of this? I mean, it started in 1988, or even before that, maybe.
I started in 83.
Huh?
I started coming here in 83.
In 83?
Correct. Yes.
That's even before me.
1983. Just to be clear.
All right, and I'll vote for it, but I want to see the economic development, and make sure you bring in architecturals for your single families. I want to see what they're going to look like.
They're not, they will not be lookalike.
I don't want them to look like the
I know
others.
question is they're not lookalike.
Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn? Don't,
Move it.
all in favor, aye. Don't forget, we have another meeting. When do we have our another meeting?